All right, I'm told it's that time, so I would like to call us to order in accordance with South Carolina Code of Laws 1985, Section 30-4-80-E. The following have been notified of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting. The Herald, the Charlotte Observer, CN2, and WRHI. Welcome everybody to our meeting. If you would all please join me first for a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, you have all received a copy of our agenda, short though it may be. Were there any adjustments or corrections?
No. No, ma'am.
All right, that will stand with unanimous consent. Do we have any public participation? Okay. Then we're going to jump right into some business. And it looks like our first item, number 3.01, is to talk about the budget for next year. Ms. Lordo.
Well, good evening.
Hello.
Hello. Well, this is our culmination meeting of a long process. So tonight, the administration is pleased to present the proposed general fund budget for the upcoming fiscal year, 2024-2025, for your consideration. The final state budget process is still ongoing. In fact, I watched most of the Senate today. And we don't expect, unfortunately, let me say, any significant changes in education funding, but we will see some slight changes. But just for the benefit of the public watching and to recap, we began our process in January, requesting the schools and the departments submit their needed request after meeting with their faculty, their staff, and their school improvement councils. In past years, and this year, you will receive a full detailed summary of all the requests. I just need to fine tune it a little bit, make sure it's consistent with position cost mainly, and make sure we don't have any duplicates. And I'm going to try to send that out to you by the end of this week. Generally, we meet in groups, and we went through the same process this year with the elementary, middle, and high school principals and department heads. They meet with our senior leadership team and share their priorities with us, and it is just really a great time to have a conversation about their needs at the school that we can bring to you and that you will see on the detailed summary. And all the items that I'm going to share with you tonight as priorities have come from those meetings, as well as our senior leadership team. Just, I can't say it enough how extremely beneficial these discussions are with our schools. And also I'd like to share that once again this year, we feel like as an administration, their requests are very well thought out. It is not just wish list items. I wish I could stand here and share with you the ability to fund all these items because we see the benefit of all of their requests once again. As you know, we're going into year 3 of this new education funding model. We're still very disappointed as we've watched the process in Columbia this year that there's no improvement in the distribution formula. As you've heard me say many times, it's not favorable for a district like Fort Mill, a high growth, a low poverty district. But the offset of that is, as an administration, we're committed to bringing you a budget that we think is going to maintain our level of academic excellence and also continue to provide our students with the highest level of instruction. We feel like this, and I know you agree, this is what our community expects. So we feel like this plan certainly continues that effort. I'm going to jump in on the slides. The first thing is just recapping next year's budget goals. We are always going to bring you a balanced budget. We do not feel like it is in the best interest to come to you and be forced to use fund balance. We want to only bring you a budget that's going to use recurring general fund dollars each year. We want to continue to recruit and retain staff in all areas of our district, with making sure that our salary schedules are competitive and market rates. And you'll hear me talk a little bit more about that. We want to maintain reasonable class sizes. That has been one of the, I think, drivers of our success over the years here in Fort Mill. So we always look at our class sizes and what it's going to take with our projected growth for next year. We want to certainly stay in compliance with all state regulations, and a lot of those, as you know, are unfunded mandates, but we want to stay in compliance. And then we continue to identify ESSER funding. We're on the last year of that, ESSER 3 funding, and other positions that we're going to have to shift to the general fund to continue to provide those services to our students. This is a summary of our proposed 2024-2025 budget. As you can see, our new budget plan totals $234,095,303. What I am presenting to you tonight is based on tax projections with a 21.9 mil increase, and I will recap how we come to that number. But our primary revenue sources for the general fund are taxes, our state education funding, some other small state categories, a few miscellaneous items, and once again, dependent on an amount of contingency transfer. And on the right side are our general fund expenditures, our large categories, certainly salaries and fringe, operations, maintenance of facilities, department allocations per pupil, I call that the school budgets, some other items such as operating our activity buses, our school resource officers, our safety plan. So you can see we're presenting a balanced budget of $234 million. And on this slide, let me just recap here. Once again, we've stated this many times. Salaries and fringe costs on this plan are still 89.4% of our total budget. So 89.4% are positions, people here. Operations is 5.8, so if you add those two together, that is 95% of our budget. Are the positions, primarily our teaching positions and our operational cost of our facilities.
Ms. Lordo,
Yes.
clarify, the line item that says taxes, that means local taxes, correct?
Correct. Local taxes and a few items like Tier 1 and Tier 3 from the state that are replacements of taxes, like the Act 388 Tier 3 replacement, is in that number.
All right, thank you.
Does that make sense? Okay. The new funding model, this is based on the House-approved plan that came out. Yours may say Senate. Mr. Burke and I updated this when I realized it. The one we put out on our website will say the House. This is based on the House
Supposed to be the House.
allocations. The new education funding model, you will see that our increase is, I'll say, only $3,309,963. And the reason I say only is the new education funding model is based on a formula to fund teacher salaries statewide, how many teachers are needed statewide based on the state weighted pupil units. But this dollar amount, as you'll see later, this covers only about 54% of our teacher pay increases. So that is where the difference for us in the state funding formula comes about, is it does not cover our teacher salary schedule. It only covers about 54%. I actually saw two districts, and this is quite amazing to me. I actually saw two districts in the state in the Spartanburg and Anderson area that are losing money. So the state put in in this version it was $230 million into the pot, but two districts are losing funding. That is, to me, how confusing the state funding formula. It just doesn't make sense statewide.
And that's before the Senate took out 30 million.
Correct. Correct.
Two districts are losing money, and now they took out.
Two districts are losing money that I think are in growth areas,
right.
not in the lower, some of the lower, smaller districts in the state.
Right.
And they lost funding.
Speaking of losing funding, when I go to the earlier columns where it says the 23-24 budget for the
Yes.
general fund was 74.9, but the actual was 74.3.
Correct.
Did we also lose funding last year?
We
from
did.
What was originally planned?
We did. We lost approximately 600,000 between when the Senate projections were sent in May, and you approved the budget in June, and then we received the final allocations in July. That was the difference in the numbers. So that just goes to my comments repeatedly about I never know what the number's going to be till I get the allocation worksheets. It is impossible to predict because it is not just based on a set dollar amount per pupil. It is based on how every district adjusts in enrollment and in weightings. We've talked a lot about that with special ed weightings. That factors into these numbers. So these are our numbers based on the House plan. So it's 3.3 million in what they call aid to classrooms, and then the retiree insurance piece, which is just a separately funded state line for insurance, and bus driver workers' comp. So the total new state revenue is $3,969,000.
Of which 600,000, a little over 600,000, is already earmarked and has to be used in those two categories.
Correct. Correct. So let's touch on the millage calculation that is in this budget. Based on the Act 388 formula, you have the authority to increase millage based on two factors, the Consumer Price Index, which for next year is 4.12%, and the population growth, which is 4.13%. So that together is 8.25%, and you apply that to our current operating millage of 265.5 mils, and that gives you a maximum millage increase of 21.9 for next year for consideration.
And I know you have this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You just probably haven't gotten to it yet. It's my favorite question to ask. How much of our budget, percentage-wise, is funded by the state versus funded a little bit by the feds versus what's on the backs of our local businesses?
Okay. So the next three slides, I'm going to show you the my detailed projections of local, state, and the little bit of federal money. But to give you the quick recap, this plan would be 57.2% local, 57.2, 42.7% state, and 0.10 of federal. And that makes up the 100%.
So, Ms. Lauderdale, so
Yes.
just for some clarity, I want to make sure I haven't lost my mind over the last 3.5 years. Which is possible. So the question I
Somebody's
have-
lost their mind. Let's
Yes.
see if it's you.
You're right.
So correct me if I'm wrong, 3 years ago, that spread was quite different, wasn't it?
Yes.
Can you provide some context?
I would say even prior to 3 years ago, the spread was certainly more state funding. It was more 60-40
Wow.
or 60-30-10.
Right.
And now, over the years, it has reversed to now we are pushing 60 local, 40 state, and then the tiny piece of the ROTC funding that's in the general fund. So we have definitely seen a shift, and we're seeing now an even larger, quicker shift with this new education funding formula.
So for acute clarity,
Yes.
what I think I heard was prior to 3 years ago, we were somewhere around 60% state. funded.
Correct. Correct.
Call it closer to 40, call it 38%, whatever you want to call it, local taxation.
Correct.
Right now, based on the number that you just gave us, I don't want to misquote you. The number that I got, unless again, I'm losing my mind, I see here, 42% is from the state now versus it used to be 60
Correct.
a few years ago.
Correct.
And 57.2% is now local,
Is now local.
which used to be 38-ish%.
Correct. 38 to 40.
That's a significant swing.
It is a significant swing because the prior formula was a set amount per student. And so as a fast-growing district, we would see the proportionate share of new revenue for our new students, where now it is not a set amount per student. It is this formula based on these weightings with these different factors that are more favorable toward higher poverty districts, lower performing districts, those type of categories. Higher special ed districts, they are receiving additional. And I think I mentioned at the last board meeting, charter schools.
Right.
Charter schools are now in this funding formula, and they are significantly swaying the calculations. And I think you would be amazed at the amount of the $230 million pot, new money that went to charter schools. Because they are in the formula. And we have been, as a state group of business officials, we have been advocating to take charter schools, remove their fair share of the funding, but just do not run them through the same formula. And they were put into the new funding formula. And it has had so much of an impact on all the districts like ours. But looking at our numbers, so property tax projections, we are projecting $131,063,000. That includes the 21.9 mills. That includes a 2% growth rate for tax collections and about a 1.5% growth rate for fee and lieu, because you generally don't see quite as much growth in your fee and lieu numbers. But that gives us 13.3 million additional property tax dollars. Interest income continues to remain strong with LGIP. We're still seeing a steady rate of over 5% on the average monthly rates for the LGIP. So I have increased the budget next year to $750,000. Tuition, we have less students now that pay tuition. We probably only have about 8 right now on the current roster that pay tuition. And then we have about the same amount of rental coming in the general fund. And that's for our cell towers. So total local revenue increase would be 13.5 million. So keep that 13.5 million. Now you look at the state increase, 3.9 million. We talked about the new education funding formula, the retiree insurance, and bus drivers. And then the small amount of junior ROTC, that's our federal funding. That is going to go up slightly. And the contingency transfer, and I have another slide at the end to give you the detail, but as you recall, we have been diminishing that fund. And so this plan would still use $2 million of those funds for 24-25. So this is a total budget increase of $16,255,868 for next year. This is based on projected student count of 18,535 students. It's based on the operating millage of 287.4, and then the countywide millage would remain the same at 30 mills. Just to recap that, that is the millage that is shared among the 4 York County school districts. York School District receives 1 mill off the top because they're the highest poverty district. And then the remaining 29 mills is distributed to all 4 of us based on our average daily membership, which we are still the largest district now. So we do receive the highest percentage of countywide tax collections. Any questions about that?
I want to talk just for 1 second about average daily membership versus
Okay.
enrollment,
Yes.
because they're not quite the same.
They're not
right?
quite the same. Average daily membership is going to be slightly less than enrollment.
Because it's really about attendance.
Correct. How many students are in their seats every day?
And so we pay for teachers based on how many are enrolled, because we
Correct.
plan for X
Growth.
number of kids to be in that class, regardless of whether one's absent that day, right?
Correct.
So the average daily membership, I don't know what our absentee rate runs, but I'm guessing it's 2 or 3% or something off. Because, you know, we've talked about 18.5, which is more like what we have now.
Right.
And so when you do a growth rate to that 18.5 for next year doesn't translate in my mind.
Because our, the 18,158 is our current year 135-day
Average daily
average
membership,
daily membership.
not enrollment.
Correct. Not enrollment. Correct. That's a great point. Yes. We get funded on, even on the new
Right.
formula, it's based on average daily membership and the average daily waivings.
Those are just not the numbers that we talk about. When you report on your
Right.
enrollment
It's
every,
full
every week or
enrollment.
every month, it's based on actual enrollment, which is 2 or
Yes.
3% higher than this because it's people that are absent on any given day.
Correct, correct. And then just to, I'll also add in here, any students that enroll after the 135th day, we do not receive funding until the next year. So basically, from the 135th day to the 180th day of school, we do not receive any funding for those students in this
And
school
in
year.
fairness, we don't add a teacher because of that either.
Correct.
Right? So, I mean, I get that, but we have to base it on how many enroll, not how many show up on from day to day.
Correct. So let's move into the expenditures. And we want to share what we are proposing for next year. I have categorized these into priority levels. As you may recall, Category 1 priority for us are the things that are the absolute highest priority. You can see our number 1 and number 2 are our teacher and salary, and it's teacher and support staff, admin staff, all other staff, bus driver, cafeteria, our salary and fringe increases for next year. This also includes some things that we have already committed to early, and just some things that are inflationary increases that I call cash out the door that we've got to account for, like property insurance, contract inflationary increases, and things like that. So of this Category 1, I think of interest, the total request is $14,013,356, but of that, the amount related to positions, current position increases and new staff needed is $13,299,000. That's how much of that number, kind of going back to my original comment of 89% of our budget is for people or positions. So 13,300,000 rounded of this 14 million are for positions. But just to give you a couple details on this, because these items are so important, we are proposing to increase our starting teacher pay from $47,000 to $50,000 next year. The House and we think the full Senate, the Senate Finance, approved the state minimum teacher salary schedule. They added 2 additional experience steps. So they added step number 27 and 28. So we would add those 2 steps as well for our teachers. So that's included in these numbers. We also have committed to 6 new classroom teachers based on growth needs. And that is a number, I call it kind of the net number after a lot of discussion about this. Mr. Young, Gray Young, spends a lot of time with each principal and each school administration. They review their projections for the next year based on grade level, at the secondary based on content, and look at their class, going back to, we want to maintain reasonable class sizes. This is looking at the most current data on kindergarten registration that we know. So we're happy to be, I'm happy to be standing here tonight telling you we can do this with 6 teachers next year. As you recall, we've had years where we had to have 50,
I was like,
40, 50.
58 was our largest,
58 was our largest.
and 20 was our smallest.
So this is, we're very happy that this is our situation. Now, some of this is still an effect of the years after COVID, where we weren't sure how quickly students were going to return to the classroom when we were still having the virtual academy. And so we had to go ahead and add some teachers. And so we had some class sizes that were very low, that we were able now to use that capacity for next year's planning. But this budget would add 6 new classroom teachers, and those are actually at the middle and high school level. 3 special ed teachers and 15 special ed assistants. This is, Dr. Maziar's is, gotta have these. We kind of joke, but we have that discussion. We start with a high number, and then I'm like, I really need the, what, I
She
need
does
the.
it every year.
I do it every year. See, she laughs. I'm like, I really need the number, the low number, the critical, the priority one. So 3 special ed teachers, and she already has those designated at certain schools.
And
for
is that
her.
because of the growth in the number of special needs enrolled students?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Distance is a combination of growth and overall need of students.
okay. I'm not sure everybody could hear it, so I'll repeat it. So there's a, there's a-
Use the mic.
Toy we've got.
Yeah.
Special ed teachers.
it's not on.
Now it is, it's ready.
The special ed teachers are for growth. The assistants is a combination of growth and overall level of need of students.
Severity and things like that.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe the special ed assistants, the original request was 20 or
Say it
above
was-
20, or,
Internally within our department, it was above 20 when I came to you.
Okay.
Sorry, was 20.
The next item is 2 school psychologists. We had already shared that need with you early on, and we were able to find 2 great candidates to fill those roles for next year. And then you heard a detailed plan of the new special services instructional coaches at the elementary level. So that's 8 positions. The elementary behavior class program lead, that class is actually at Orchard Park. So that would be a lead teacher for that class. And then, as I've mentioned, we have 7 positions in ESSER 3 funding that we will need to shift to the general fund. That's a combination of some instructional support, mental health counselors. We have a couple various type positions that were in that ESSER 3 funding. There's 7 positions,
And that's the end of that.
and that's the end of ESSER.
Of
That will
rolling ESSER.
expire in September, this coming September. So we need to move those 7 positions, but I do feel, as you recall, we received the lowest amount of ESSER funding statewide. And we hated that. We wanted more funding, but I have colleagues now that I am hearing them say they've got to move 50, 60 positions from ESSER funding to their general fund for next year.
Right.
And deal with this crazy new education funding formula. So I'm not sure how they're doing that. That's a lot of positions.
That's a lot of positions in
A
one
lot
year
of
at the last
positions.
minute.
That is the norm that I'm hearing from, surrounding districts.
Well, and we had a lot more than 7, but you've weaned us off of it.
I have.
over the
We
last
had
few
some in,
years,
a
too.
little in ESSER 1. We had the bulk in ESSER 2.
Right,
And then this is our last 7.
Not everyone planned as well as
yeah.
from a school
I was
district
just
did.
gonna
It's
say,
just
I'm
tough when you
thankful for our
receive the
planner.
one-time, it's tough when you receive one-time funding, non-recurring
bunch,
funding,
right.
and
Yeah.
The next item is the hiring of the principal and bookkeeper for the new elementary school. We call it Elementary 12 right now, until it gets named. Those two positions would come in January, and they would be involved in the planning and the opening of Elementary 12. The next two line items are related to technology, instructional and network, engineering. These are our current contracts, our software licensing contracts. These are dependent on either the number of staff we have, the number of devices, those type of things. These are inflationary contract increases for technology. The next couple items are related to our facilities, utilities, cleaning, and insurance, and then maintenance, repairs, supplies, and contracted services. Mr. Rahman and I have spent a lot of time looking at their detail this year. We look at their expenses year to date. We project it out to June 30th, and then look at what do we need to, from a cash flow standpoint for next year. We know our insurance increases, our cleaning cost increases. We're projecting on utilities, but I can tell you it's very, very difficult to budget maintenance, repairs, and supplies, because if something breaks at a school, we are going to go fix it. And so we look at actual costs for this year and try to project that out. So as you can see, there's a couple places we're going to be over budget this year in those areas that we need to account for. And then the last two priority one items are for transportation. They requested 12 bus aid positions. I can tell you that from what I hear, more common than not, we have the transportation office staff are on bus routes every day because we do not have enough bus aides, and they have to have someone with those students on the buses.
So these are special needs students that have to have an aide.
A lot
This
of
is not
times.
your traditional
Correct.
gen ed bus, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Sometimes I believe our office staff, they are actually driving, but these are for aid positions, and they requested 12 additional positions to help with that need with all the new routes and the growth. Yes. And then also they requested, and I reviewed the actual cost year to date for running our activity buses for gas repairs. And we need to increase that budget as well for next year, just the number of trips, the number of buses on the road, gas cost, things like that. So these total $14,013,356 to fund priority one outside of what I have shared with you as far as the new education funding. I factored that in. I factored in other state funding, the local revenue growth. We would need 15.5 mils. See how that column works to fund the $14,013,000 for category one. Okay, so moving on to category 2, 3, and 4. Our next category has two additional special services items. One is related to a new speech language pathologist due to growth. That was actually, I believe that was Dr. Maziar's second item on her request, was that position. And then special ed assistant salaries, that has been a discussion for, I know we discussed it a good bit last year. I think this is probably the third year we've discussed it, is just due to the nature of the job requirements in those classrooms that we needed to look at moving them to a separate salary schedule. I can tell you that several districts across the state, I don't know the exact number, but I'm hearing it more now that other districts have those special ed assistants on a separate salary schedule from regular classroom assistants. And I can tell you that I know our neighboring district, Rock Hill, has them on a separate scale.
Is their separate scale equivalent to what this would this bring us up to that scale?
I believe that we would start moving towards it. I don't think this number, we could exactly match it.
Okay.
But this piece is also with the other piece of moving the classroom assistant scale up in priority one. And then this piece was an additional 5% above that scale to put special ed assistants on a separate scale for next year. So we can continue to look at that. But this would at least move us in that direction of just recognizing, as I say, we hear a lot of, we have a lot of turnover in that area. And when they do exit interviews, it's just a very tough position in most of those classrooms. The next item is 3 additional ESOL teachers. The request was for 5. So I have put 3 as category 2 priority. And then the last category 2 priority is for curriculum. This is a combination of a lot of different items, software, programs they have, supplies. And I put a note, these are all things that were prior state funded. And then those state funds went away and rolled into the new formula. And last year, you saw a lot of these items on the year-end transfer. And we've said we need to build them into the recurring budget. So this is a combination of probably about a dozen line items for curriculum. No new items, but just things that are currently providing for the schools, software and things like that, and supplies that they are funding for the schools. So if we don't do this in category 2, you'll probably see it on the year-end transfer request again. Category 3, so category 2 priority, let me just recap there. That would be an additional 3 mills. So you see that at the bottom?
Yeah.
So now we're up to 18.5, 15.5 plus 3. So 18.5 would fund category 1 and 2. Category 3, this has been under discussion for several years, specifically in the summer. We struggle with the high schools having guidance counseling services throughout the summer because guidance counselors are not on a 240-day contract, and they try to split their days so that we have coverage every day of the summer. But sometimes we have a problem because it crosses fiscal years, so it crosses benefit years, it crosses payroll years, and it's very difficult. So the high school principals, this was their number 1 request, was to move one of their lead counselors to a 240-day contract so they can be sure that they have coverage throughout the summer and that that counselor is the lead and that counselor works all summer. And then we still take the other remaining counselors and split their days. Does that make sense? So
And
this was their
that
number
was the-
1 request.
That was the number 1 request, like pretty much from all the high school principals?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct. The second item is adding an assistant principal at the alternative school, Oak Grove Academy. We currently only have a principal there, Mr. Daniel Beals. If he is not there, we do not have any administrative coverage. And so what happens is either one of our other middle school principals, I've heard, goes over to cover that day, or we have district office administration that will go and cover to support the teachers there. And that is a problem with only having 1 administrator on site if he is not at the facility for whatever professional development reasons, sick, whatever reasons. We do not have coverage there. So this would add an assistant principal for the alternative school. The next item is adding an additional assistant supervisor for maintenance. It has been many years since we have added an administrative person, an additional assistant supervisor for maintenance, and we have added multiple schools and added on to their staff. So this would add an additional supervisor for maintenance. The next 2 items are related to athletics. These were on the year-end transfer last year. The funding for the district athletic insurance for high school and middle school, and then the athletic funds. It has been at least 10 years, I think 12 years, we have maintained the athletic fee at $100. We've not increased it, but we added Catawba Ridge High School, so we added all of their coaches, all of their band director and band assistants, and we have not increased the fee. And our high school growth just has not been enough to maintain bringing on all that additional coaching and band director staff. So last year, I had to request on the year-end transfer to supplement those fees, and it's also gate receipts that go into that. But this would build it into the recurring budget. So this would be no new dollars as far as new services related to athletics or new equipment. This would just be continuing to maintain our current athletic program.
And it would be divided among the three high schools.
It actually goes into one fund. We track it by the three different high schools, but it's looking at the total fund and making sure we are covering all the cost of that fund. So category 3, that is an additional 1.8 mils. So we have 15.3, we have 3 for category 2, and then 1.8 for category 3. And then category 4 is the curriculum department requested to add a lead elementary GT teacher. This was also requested by the elementary principals in our meeting with them. This was one of their discussion items that they felt like this would be so beneficial to have a lead elementary GT teacher. As I mentioned, in category 4, we've included those other 2 ESOL teachers to meet the request of 5. Special services, their next level request was a 504 facilitator. I think you have heard some reports about all of the meetings and requirements, and this would assist with that. And then the next 2 are curriculum related, $50,000 for additional teacher professional development and STEAM funding. And then the last one is related to athletics and band coaching stipends. This was also a request of the high school principals in meeting with their schools to look at increasing our coaching stipend salary schedule. I can't remember, well, we made some small adjustments on that, but they continue to look at the market and share with us that we continue to be under, because a lot of districts increase it each year and put in an inflationary cost of living increase on their coaching. I say coaching, but it's coaching and band directors on those schedules. And we do not do that. We keep it at a fixed amount unless you approve a set increase like we did a couple years ago. So this would be enable us just to spread that out among our full schedule for coaches and band directors. So category 4 rounds us out with an additional 1.6 mils, and that would be our 21.9 mils and broken down by 4 categories.
And you're gonna find $39 somewhere.
I am gonna find $39. Out of 234 million, I'll be okay, I think, so,
So
yeah.
Ms. Lordo, remind
Yes.
me again if we don't cover the athletic insurance, how that's paid for.
If we don't cover the athletic insurance, the schools would have to cover it out of their school activity funds, which they did for many years, and then we started picking it up last year was the first year we picked it up in that year in transfer, and they were most appreciative.
It seems like, I don't know, insurance should be an absorbed cost by the district.
right.
Like that should
Correct, and that's why we picked it up last year. It did not make the general fund budget. Well, I say last year, but it's really the year we're in right now. It did not make the general fund budget, so it was an item that I put on the year-end transfer, and we did pick it up at the district level last year, but it's not in the recurring budget for next year.
But it was not required to be taken out of the three individual, or the
Correct.
school budgets.
For the current year, 23-24, it was not required to be taken out of their school activity funds or their school athletic activity funds.
Is that only for athletics, or is that for band as well?
That is for band as well. Band students are covered.
That's what I thought.
Um,
I know we say athletics, but it's athletic and band because it's
Correct.
the same. The
It's
$100 fee for all those
extracurricular
things.
for
Even
secondary.
some theater stuff, because I know some of those things are $100, whatever that fee is called as well.
We work with Bates Brothers or Bollinger Insurance. It's separate from Skizbit does not do athletic insurance. I keep asking them to look at that, but they are not in that piece of insurance business. And so we have a separate group, and they are excellent with us if we would have a situation where we would need to make a claim on something like a band student. They would cover it. Yes. Yes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead through. Let me go through a couple more, and
I'm just
then
ready.
we will come back
I got 10 for
while
you.
y'all think about this.
Okay.
While you think about this.
Okay.
Okay?
Sorry.
Just want to touch on, I know everyone always likes to know, well, what is the actual impact of this when we talk about millage? Let me start by just reminding everyone, homeowners do not pay operating millage on their primary residence. So they are not impacted by this discussion in the general fund. Now, all of us that own a vehicle, you can see we are impacted. And vehicles are assessed at 6%. So I used a $30,000 vehicle and a $40,000 vehicle to show per 1 mil, it's $1.80 or $2.40 on a $40,000 vehicle. So 6% non-owner occupied property. This is primarily rentals or businesses. And then commercial, 10.5% would be a business, their furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Not their real estate, not the piece of land that a business is sitting on, but it's their furniture, fixtures, and equipment, their inventory, things like that. The impact, if you calculate that out, I ran it at 15.5, the category 1, and then I ran it at the full amount of 21.9. Just to show the difference, so for a non-occupied 6% property, could be a piece of real estate. The difference between 15.5 mils would be $186 a year, or $263. That's $77 difference. Going down to commercial, the difference between $325 a year or $460 would be $135. And then for a car, which we can all relate to, the difference would be $16 a year if you approve the full budget plan with all 4 categories for a vehicle.
Clarify again.
Okay.
So the non-occupied is a rental property that someone owns.
Correct.
So it's not their house, it's a second,
It could be a
home.
second home,
And
could be an apartment
that's what I was gonna
complex.
say. So this
Yes.
would be, if the apartment was worth 200,000, this is the
Correct.
example, right?
Correct.
And then the commercial at the 10.5, you said is not the
It's a
property
bit,
value, it's
no, it is like furniture, fixtures, and equipment inventory inside a business.
It's not sales related, it's not income related, it's
It's
specifically
assets.
stuff.
Correct. It's
Okay.
stuff.
So in the case of a power sports dealership, it's not my inventory that sits on the ground. It's my desks, my computers, my office equipment, things of that nature,
Shop tools.
shop tools.
But
That's-
not your building.
It's not your
not
building or
land.
your
Nope,
land.
and it's not my for sale inventory.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. Just to share where we currently are, we always like to compare ourselves to state average spend per pupil and certainly our local districts. You can see that the Insight data, which we use because that is data that the state compiles, so we know it is exactly calculated the same way for every district by certain categories. Our spend is $11,602. The state average is $12,625. So we're not only under the other 3 York County districts, as the lowest average spend per pupil, but we're under the state average as well.
By about $1,000 per student, or give or take about $18
And-
million.
Correct. And interestingly enough, there's a few districts around the state that are similar in growth or size or things that we look at. It's always interesting to look at them, so I'm going to share a few with you. So keep in mind, our number is 11,602. Horry County School District is 13,068. Lexington 1, which is a high-growth district similar to Fort Mill, they're at 12,694. Lexington 5 is at 14,799. Charleston, 15,076. Beaufort is 15,608.
Say
Richland
that
1,
number again?
15,608. Richland 1 is 18,330. They're getting a lot more federal dollars,
They get a lot of
and
poverty numbers also.
yes.
So, Ms. Lurdo, this also says this is from 2022.
Correct. This is the latest data. It takes the state a while. So once I'm just being honest, once we end June, we end our fiscal year, all districts have until December 1st to submit their audit reports.
Okay.
And these numbers come directly off of audit reports submitted, and they are publicly available on the State Department's website. And as I mentioned, it is equitable because it is calculated in exactly the same manner, using the same exact account codes.
Okay.
It doesn't pick up things like debt service and capital funding. It picks up just other federal funding and general funds. And so I feel good that I'm comparing apples to apples
So you
using
wouldn't-
this
You
data.
don't project a big influx, a change here.
I don't, because I actually, when I was preparing this, looked at this same data this time last year, and it was these same districts.
Of course you did.
And everybody just went up a little bit.
That's what I was saying.
So-
It's- The chart has looked the same, even though the numbers have tweaked a bit. But
Correct.
that chart has been pretty consistent for
Correct.
as long as I've
But it's
seen it.
always a good reminder, I think, for our community, how careful we are with our spend.
Ms. Laura, once upon a time, we were like seventh lowest in the state. Do you know where we?
In spend, I do not know, but I can pull that data and share it with you at the next meeting. I can send it out to you and then share it publicly at the next meeting.
That'd be great. Yeah,
Um,
because the chart showed the per pupil spend, and we were always way on this end. And then it showed growth rate, and we were always way on that
Correct.
end.
Right.
And it also showed administrative spend, and we were always way down on this end, right? So it was good to
Yes.
see some of those bits and pieces.
See where we are. And it's all now also available on the new dashboard
Yep.
on the South Carolina Fiscal and Revenue Affairs Office, the new data, which is a little bit different calculations from Insight, but I will pull some of those and share with you and share those publicly at the next meeting as well. We can see. I don't expect we're going to see any significant changes though, because this is all, and the new dashboard is all based on audited data, on actual audit report submissions, and they key in off the audited report submission file, electronic files.
And even just,
Oh.
if comparing, for example, to Rock Hill, right, which is very similar in size. I know we're still bigger, but very similar in size. But it makes sense because they have a higher poverty weighting, so they're going to be receiving additional dollars, right? I mean,
Correct.
So it would make sense that they're able to spend more per student because they're receiving more per student than we are.
Yeah, we're efficient with our dollars, but we get less dollars. That's what
Right.
pushes us down.
We get less
into this
dollars.
level.
Rock Hill got more dollars on the house projections.
Yeah, by a pretty good margin, I imagine.
The contingency reserve fund, like to give you a recap of where we are on that. Last June 30th, or the beginning of this fiscal year, we started with $6,023,893. We have paid for our continued lobbying efforts on the impact fee legislation with Burr Foreman, with their lobbyists, and we've also paid our annual fee to York County. We pay York County $50,000 a year for administration of impact fees. And then you had approved in our current year budget, we are using $3,350,000 out of those funds. So we would end June 30th with a balance of $2,599,581. And as you recall, I've shown you on some previous slides where this budget plan would use 2 million of that.
Right.
Which we had planned for. So we would not have an additional $3,350,000 available. I do anticipate, you've heard me say, if property taxes continue through the last couple of months, I think we will have potentially the ability to put a little more in here at June 30th. But I would not necessarily feel comfortable bringing a lot more than 2 million into the budget for next year because we will be looking at the next couple years of opening new schools. And that is going to have a significant impact on our budget when we are going back-to-back years of opening new schools.
So the good news, I guess, would be you baked into this plan a million or so of things that in the past we've said, okay, we'll cover that out of
Correct.
any
I'm trying to
excess.
pull us off of that
It's over here.
dependency on the non-recurring.
And so anything we had left over would actually go back in to be able to have it sitting there for the new school openings.
Correct. Correct.
Before you do your 10, can I ask
Okay.
one easy?
Hey, I'm giving all the boards a floor
All
before I go.
Okay.
I have one with regard to impact fees. Some of our neighbors have been successful in receiving the approval for impact fees, some have not. Does everyone pay for the impact fee management, or are we the only ones paying for that?
Everyone pays for the impact fee management at the same amount.
Okay, that
We
was
Really
made
just
sure.
was my
My follow-up.
person to administer all the paperwork and stuff,
Correct.
all the transfers.
Correct. Because we did ask the question when our neighbors started, well, couldn't we, won't our fee go down and
Right.
share? And we were told no. So but we made sure they're paying the same amount and they are.
Okay.
Yes, that's a good question.
Ms. Lordo, I got some
As I
stuff.
said, we got some down here
Okay.
and some down
Got
there.
some
Who wants to
stuff.
go? All
I
right,
got
you
10, but I might get out 4.
All right.
So you opened this up, and this just so stood out to me.
Okay.
You said this new funding formula wasn't favorable. I got to give you credit on using that terminology.
Nice words.
This, yeah, it's a joke. As you continue down, I mean, it really, I feel like everybody in the room or anyone watching could also kind of see how that unpacks, you know. And one of the things that you mentioned at the very beginning, so this is a compounding issue here. This isn't just a funding formula issue. You mentioned a phrase called unfunded mandate. Can you please explain what that is, and can you give us some examples of those unfunded mandates?
I would say probably the largest is, as I mentioned, the teacher salary scale.
Yes.
Being in a fast-growing district and how we have had to add, as we mentioned, the number of new teachers, and then I shared with you that the new education funding formula is supposed to fund teacher salaries, and how short we are in funding teacher salaries. I consider that an unfunded mandate because we have to at least pay off of the state minimum teacher salary schedule, and we cannot pay a teacher less than we paid them in the prior year. And we are required to step them for another year of experience based on their certificate
So
level.
the bare minimum of what the state would require us to do would cost more than the money that we're getting.
Correct.
So
Yes.
We didn't add any more teachers or anything else, and we just stepped them up. It would cost more than the 3 point whatever that they're giving us.
Correct.
So just for clarity here, maybe acute clarity,
Acute clarity.
if you will. If we hear from like our state legislators to say, hey, we gave teachers a $2,000 increase, that's not exactly true. They gave us the ability to tax our people to give them that 2,000 increase.
Correct, because the new state funding formula still takes into account the old antiquated index of tax paying ability formula, which looks at the wealth of the tax population of a district. And that calculation factors into this new funding formula. So districts that have a higher index of taxpayer ability are going to receive less state funding, which we are in that situation. And also, the state funding formula requires the 75%, 25% match, meaning for 75% of the state dollars, we have to match 25%
Correct.
of the state dollars.
So they gave us the requirement to do it, but not the dollars.
Same thing could be said. This one just comes off the top of my head about the unencumbered time for our
Great example. That was
elementary
over
teachers.
$400,000 that you had to approve tax millage for in this year's budget that we're operating in to cover unencumbered time for the additional support staff that we had to add to give our teachers, all of our teachers, that ability.
Great for the teachers, but it did cost $400,000.
Right.
Yeah, there is a reality there.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
So now you mentioned that 89, I believe the exact number, and I don't want to misquote you, was 89.4% of
89.4%,
of our total budget is salaries and fringe.
correct.
When we were at I want to get more clarity here as well. When we were at the FCSBA at our last conference, I attended a breakout session where we went over budgeting and things like that. And the gentleman who was speaking said, if your budget for teacher pay and all that stuff is 90% of your budget, he pretty much was like, hey, you're doing it wrong. Why would he say that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean,
What was his follow-up to that comment?
because it costs money to run the district as well as to pay teachers, right? And I think,
You're not spending enough on all the
I
other
think that was
support.
right, that he was saying
Oh.
you can't ignore the running of the district. And we have historically relied heavily on a precious few to run the
Right.
district and kept those expenses lean.
Yep. So what in my mind ran through whenever I heard that statement is context is everything.
Yes, I mean, I would say to reduce that percentage, you would have to lower your number of teachers, which would increase your class sizes, which
Right.
could
Which is totally-
potentially
Right.
lower your learning of your students.
Yeah.
And the ability of your teachers to effectively provide a world-class education to
Right.
those children because they've gone from having 22 to 30 of them.
I think that person was just wrong.
Yeah.
The
and-
teachers,
and
the
I think-
teachers had the largest impact on
Right.
Right.
happening
Right.
to those
Right.
kids.
And I think you've got situations where federal dollars maybe are earmarked for things that aren't employees. Well, we're not federal dollar
Right.
heavy.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of that budget is offset by the amount of money that's being spent on materials and supplies or curriculum materials that's earmarked specifically from federal dollars, which will drive that percentage up
Right,
in other districts.
true.
Context. Right. So to get back to Mr. Bodie's point, I wrote this down about the impact to our small business, because let's not make let's not mince words here. We're talking about going from a large pot of money doing the lion's share to from a small pot who are doing a good amount. Now that small portion is definitely holding the lion's share of this budget, to while the much larger bucket is just doing very, very, very minimal. It's really been reversed. The whole
Yes,
thing's been
between the
reversed.
state and local.
Yeah, so
Yes.
if we're looking at 57% of, let's not kid ourselves, this is downtown Fort Mill Main Street funding our schools. And that's about it. This isn't coming from primary homes. Yes, we're getting the fee in lieu from some of these major corporations. We've got the hospital, but the lion's share of this sucker is coming from a very small pot. That right there, we have to be responsible to fund the schools and keep them at the level that they're at, but that's unsustainable. I mean, like, this thing continues to tick up like that. We can't do that.
I think that it, we really opposed the new funding formula last session, and we were told we need a couple years of data, we need to see how this is going to work out. Don't panic, it's going to level out. We saw no movement, we saw no interest in moving that needle by our House or Senate members, and I'm speaking statewide. My colleagues also heavily involved with their delegation members and talking to them, and we just saw no interest this year in moving that formula in any way this year.
And part of the challenge, I think, with that is, I don't know, our small businesses are screaming, and I don't mean that literally, to us about their concerns, but I don't know that the state is hearing that
Correct.
across the board from, again, statewide from
Right.
small businesses, because this is not a unique problem to Fort Mill. We're much heavier weighted because we don't have as much commercial business to spread it among and all that kind of stuff, but the essence is still the same on a small business owner in any district, unless they're a high poverty district that's not having to do anything with taxes. But so I don't know how to help our small businesses coagulate around that message.
Oh yeah, they're
to
totally caught.
state legislators.
They're caught in the crosshairs because most of these people are pretty much working around the clock anyway.
Right.
You know, it's not like they even know the first step about going and dealing with legislation. You know, and they shouldn't.
But I think you go back to the Act 388 formula.
Right.
Also, is that it was developed. It is one thing that does match growth, in that it matches the consumer price index, the inflationary cost increases with that percentage, as well as the population growth. So that is a piece that can be fortunate or unfortunate. You do have ability to control, is that local tax millage, but it is based on that formula, in that it is tied to match the population growth, which matches the increase in services we have to provide,
As did base
for the
student
growth,
costs, right? It
as
was
did base student costs.
based on number of kids. Therefore,
Yes.
you can equate in your mind number of teachers and number of
Correct.
staff and all those things. But
Correct.
here we are.
Done.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
We're just gonna work our way down the line.
Yes.
I just have a quick question, but I do want to thank the administrators that are in the room. I know how much time is spent in this process at the school level, then at the district level, to get to this point to
Yes.
kind of
A
form.
lot of discussion.
Yeah, and kind of following up on what you said, you've built a very proactive budget that continues to keep Fort Mill at the head of the class, which is really reactionary to the funding formula. You know what I mean? So, which puts us in the tough position that if we want to continue maintain the quality of education in Fort Mill, we've got tough decisions to make. But my question's quick. When will we start seeing an impact to operation costs with the energy management program?
We have had a great, I'm going to call it an assessment meeting. You might get to help me, Joe. What Snyder called it, the meeting we had, and they started outlining specifics.
Put a plan together, trying to hit the payouts first. There's money in the budget that approved already. So as soon as we get the final, I think that's the next one.
I think they were talking about coming back in July or August. We asked a couple questions, some things we wanted them to look at. They are coming back, and then they will present to you early fall their detailed plan. And then once they present their detailed plan and you are good with their detailed plan, they will start construction this fall. So, I mean, I would say not in this next budget year, but in the next budget year, with
be a
some of the
couple
quick
quick hits.
payback items. But their plan is to be in construction on doing some of the equipment changes, mid to late fall.
It'll take time to see that though,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah.
so.
But every school, I think almost every school was impacted. We were extremely pleased with their plan. It's really quite exciting and the opportunity there for savings.
Thank you.
When I first looked at this and I saw an administrator or an assistant principal for Oak Grove, I was a little bit like, but their numbers. But then I want to make sure I heard you correctly, that if this doesn't happen, the current strategy is borrowing from nearby schools where possibly those administrators do not know those students, don't have a relationship with those students, but are there trying to deal with a situation that probably needs to be relationship based.
Correct.
That's current.
From what I understand, a good many, yes,
And so just for myself, because like Scott said, we have tough decisions to make, but I can sleep a lot better about how much more I will have to pay on my car taxes and my situation if I can say that. But right here at priority 3, I was putting relationship with students who need relationship.
correct.
Okay.
We are making this work.
I-
We
I
are not
know,
leaving
I'm
them
not judging, I just
unattended, but
wanted
it
to
is very
make sure I
difficult
Understood.
from what I'm told.
Yeah, I can only imagine how hard that would be to get
Yeah.
pulled and try and help. And then we've left another school where those relationships
Right.
matter.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Keep going.
A lot of great questions thus far. I'm anxious to get to Mr. Bodie.
I know. See if I have anything left.
I rely on his.
Tee it up.
He
Tee
needs his
it
own
up,
walk-in
baby.
music.
He does need walk up, period. Did you hear that, Gilbert? He needs walk up music.
Okay. All right, so I heard projected for this coming budget, if all goes well, depending on what you're presenting, 57% of that budget, we're depending on local taxation. 2020, or just shy of 2020, prior to 2020, it was 38% and some change.
Correct.
2024, statewide, we're projecting 42% in 2024, 2025. In 2020 or prior, we were 60%. So if my math is correct, you're telling me that essentially we're somewhere around 17 to 18% swing
Yes.
in state funding,
Yes.
lack thereof.
Yes.
That's my understanding.
Correct.
Okay.
Which is $40
Which
million.
is, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
a gigantic number.
Right.
Okay, got it. So, Ms. Laurel, can you kind of share with the public, like, what's your feeling about this budget cycle versus the last 2, 3, 4 years?
Okay. So we talked a lot about the uncertainty of state funding tonight. I continue, and I'm going to at the end share kind of what I just learned about the Senate projections. There's still a lot of uncertainty. I feel like this is a solid plan. I feel like we have certainly gone through, and our process has been very thoughtful, very thorough, very mindful of the school needs. So I feel like what we're bringing you, as far as our projected expenditures for next year, have been very well thought out. There's always going to be uncertainty on the revenue side. We haven't talked about fund balance tonight, but I think you all know and understand why that's so important, why we have to have an adequate fund balance with the uncertainty of state funding now. But I'm proud of our district and our leadership team and our school leadership teams and what we have accomplished and what we've set as the priorities for next year with this.
Thank you. In one of the bullet point summaries, you have maintain reasonable class size at all levels.
Yes.
We highlighted building more schools would mitigate increasing classroom sizes. And now tonight, we're also talking about other ways or another way of mitigating. Can you kind of share with the public, like differentiate that, please? Because folks were, I
Sure.
walked someone mentioned.
As I mentioned, our student services assistant principal, Mr. Gary Young, works extremely closely with the school administrations, has multiple conversations and detailed meetings looking at their projections to the level of each classroom and how many first grade students do we predict next year? How many teachers do you currently have? How many will you need next year? We have shifted a couple FTEs between schools where we already had some retirements or resignations, and we have determined the need to shift those FTEs to another school where we were already concerned about potential class sizes in that school at a particular grade level for next year. So probably even more so going into next year, I think we continue to improve in that area, and I think we're operating it as tight as ever for this budget plan, really to get us down to 6 new teachers. That's amazing for us, but it's because we're being very careful and very detailed about looking at every classroom for next year and what the class size is going to be. Now, if we, as always, if we get into the summer and we start having some bubble areas, we would come to you potentially and say, we think we need to add another teacher. We know we've got fund balance available if we need to, if we have any bubble areas that we are concerned about. But so far, we feel very good about the class sizes across the district for next year, elementary, middle, and high school.
Thank you. This next one here, I don't think you're going to be able to answer it now, but by the next meeting, I would like to get some insight on this here. So this is more so pertaining to return on investment.
Okay.
Last year, there were some behavioral interventionists that we approved and other positions. I would like to get some insight on how we quantify the outcome of that position. I'm interested. How have those positions helped our school district?
I think you're correct in that I believe we already have on the agenda schedule for the next meeting, potentially, or the second meeting in May. Curriculum is planning to be on the agenda, and you had asked for a report on some of the new coordinator positions and how that was going this year and how they're supporting the schools. And so curriculum's already working on that presentation for you. I may also ask Dr. Maziarz if she would like to join them and give you some updates on some of the different positions that we've added in special services, special education, to share with you how that's impacted those students as well. Because that area, we've added a good many special positions over the last couple of budget years with school psychologists, mental health counselors, behavior interventionists, those type of positions.
And I would say how it has benefited the students, but also how it's benefited the rest of the staff in that school, because there's been a persons, dedicated to
supporting.
dealing in certain situations, right?
Correct. So y'all will help me
Yep.
next
Yep.
time? Okay.
Yep. So, and that's, I believe in what we're doing. If I continue to vote yes on something, I just want to be able to see. I know academically we're sound, we're all of that, but now we're adding these
Sure.
positions. I want to be able to see how we have affected in more ways. This is more technology. We may need Mr. Spittle for this one. So, Brian, the question I have for you is from a.
Please.
I was over at Catawba today, and you can't get anything in there. I tell you what, no one's cracking any codes in Catawba Ridge High School. I can tell you that. I'm being facetious on that, but the question I have for you is, can you kind of tell the community, like, I know there's some investment here in technology. What are we most proud of the last 2 or 3 years and what we've done? It's a two-part question. So that's the first question. And then the second one is going to be that K through 12 cybersecurity attacks are up. I'm interested in knowing, are we investing appropriately?
Yeah, so I think I'm most proud of the team that I work with and the teachers, students, staff in this district. A lot of that work is behind the scenes, but it is critically important now to the success of students. You know, we are one-to-one at middle school and high schools and moving that direction for second through fifth grade. So it's a lot of logistics, it's a lot of support, but they, you know, they do great work, and so I think I'm most proud of that team and the work that they've done. And then your second question was about cybersecurity?
Yes, sir.
So, I think it was, are we making the correct investments in that area? So, a couple things. We have a strategic partner that helps us monitor our systems around the clock. So I think that is a strategic investment that provides a skill set that we just couldn't really maintain at a level required in the constantly changing threat environment. I'm a member of the South Carolina Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity Program, and that is beneficial to us because they also provide some monitoring for our students and staff, and then also provide threat intelligence for what's going on in South Carolina. And then our strategic partner really has a global presence, and they provide threat intelligence about what's going on around the world. So I think we have been very strategic and deliberate in our investments. And with the recent passage of the referendum, we've got an opportunity to continue those investments with some additional items in the data center.
Thank you for the state of the business.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Going to category 2 priority. This is, you did comment regarding the athletic funds. I just want to ask a couple of questions around the athletic funds, or more so the athletic fee. And so I think you had mentioned it's been 10 years or so since we've had $100.
Yes, I think it has been closer to 12 years.
Wow.
It's been a while.
That we've had the $100.
So share with us, what does that 100 really mean?
So the $100 athletic, we call it athletic fee, band students also pay that. We track that from an accounting standpoint in a completely separate fund. So those funds, along with, I mentioned gate tickets, admissions for athletic events, those funds go to directly pay all of the coaching / band stipends. It covers a small amount of travel. And when I say a small amount of travel, it covers their league games. If teams elect to go to a tournament, like over Christmas or during the summer, they have to cover that separately out of their school activity funds. That does not come out of the $100 fee. So it's very restrictive on how we account for it and what's paid out of that. But we, at some point, need to look at increasing that if we also want to keep our coaching salary stipend schedules competitive with surrounding districts, because we are lower.
Or we would have to continue to increase it here.
Or we would increase it here, correct. We either need to put more general fund funding in or look at increasing our fee, or both, to maintain our athletic programs at the same level.
And I'm gonna say, I think it's been longer than 12 years, and the only
You
reason
think-
I say
okay.
that, I feel like that went into effect either when my oldest was a senior or when he was a junior. So that would have either been fall of 2010 or fall of 2011.
So it might be
And I know
13 years.
we've looked at it the last couple of years.
Right.
We've compared to other districts, and some are doing
Yeah.
125 and doing some are 75 and some are none,
Correct.
right? And some have differences where if you play 3 sports, you don't pay, it's not $300 and
I think it came out of the
there's a lot of flavors.
2009
Yeah.
major budget
Yep.
cuts that we had
It did.
from the recession at that point in time.
I will share that I asked the question when we met with the high school principals specifically. I asked the question, do they feel like their parents would support an increase in the fee? And all 3 of them said yes. They felt like their families would support that. And so I started gathering some data as far as how many athletes we have at each school, how many play 2 sports, how many play multiple sports. So I may pull that back out and share that with you, just so you could be aware of the potential revenue that could come in with a small increase on the fee.
And I think it's fair to say that also applies in middle school.
Correct. It also
Just
applies
high
in middle school. Yes.
And I don't know the answer to this, but I know band pays it. What I don't know is if they pay it multiple times a year to do.
No.
They do not.
They pay it once. Yes, for band.
So if you're in winter guard,
Yes.
but you're also in marching band, you're only paying
Those are
once.
only individual things.
But if you play football and you wrestle, you're paying
And
twice,
twice.
but it's a reduced. And
It's
if you,
not-
I think
it's
if
not
you have
reduced.
3 sports,
It's not reduced.
No, it's not reduced right now.
oh,
It's not
okay.
reduced.
But that's something we may think about, that we were looking at the data on that.
Right.
Okay.
How many we have that play multiple sports. And if we increase it, maybe only increasing it for the first sport and then keep it at the 100 for the others.
Right.
All kinds of different options we could look at. So I will pull out that data. I'm glad to share that if we can have a discussion about that.
The athletic band coaching stipends increase. I know 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I know we had the athletic directors and Mr. Young approached us and
Correct.
we approved whatever that was. And I knew at the time it wasn't enough then, in my opinion. I believe that the stipend piece, I personally believe that this does help increase the quality of coaches that you get. I truly believe that. And so I just wanted to applaud you on you all
Sure, thank
considering
you.
that or adding this or having this.
Yes, and you're correct. At that time, we moved towards, we did not become like the highest paying stipend district by any means in the area. But we felt like we were moving up a little bit. But as I mentioned, several districts, they also every year as they go through their budget process, they apply a cost of living or an inflationary increase to their stipend scales. So ours stay fixed. And so that, once again, puts us back further behind as they're increasing theirs.
Perfect. Last one, and this was this is the STEAM funding. So just a quick question here. I know that there's been past where there's been some kind of funding that we've got
Yes.
elsewhere.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. We Mr. Romanit negotiated a 7-year contract on our cell tower. And so we designated our cell tower revenue to go towards our STEAM program. And so I believe, only have 1 more year on our cell tower. And so
Well, that's appreciate it,
curriculum,
Joe.
yes.
Okay.
And it's been $215,000 a year.
Wow. Okay.
So curriculum is now struggling with how much, what are they going to do with the STEAM program, and then how we're going to fund it.
The cell tower's not going away, and so there is always an opportunity for,
Well, that
That
one's
was,
50-year.
yeah.
Got it.
so,
It's not-
so the funding is done because they only paid for 7 years even though they're leasing it for 50.
They were paying a small amount every year, and we negotiated upfront
Like a chunk.
payment.
Okay, but for the full 50 years or however many years it is.
Correct.
I got you.
Yes,
Well, and we used a lot of that to fund the Discovery Ed program that we started.
yes,
Right.
Correct?
yes,
That's the couple
yes.
And then the
$100,000 a year.
continuing on.
correct.
I know when we have special, like when we land a helicopter, we look for sponsorships because I've been fortunate enough to sponsor a helicopter a couple of times coming in, so I know we work on that.
We had some intel about a weather tower that somebody was interested in putting somewhere? Does that ring any bells with anybody?
From Facebook.
Do you remember that? Yes.
Yeah,
Is that
Um,
microphone?
The,
nope, nope, nope.
That never developed?
uh,
Yeah, there was an interest in getting some type of weather camera in this general vicinity, and we said we'd raise our hand, and I'm just curious if that ever went anywhere. Okay, we'll follow up.
oh yeah, I do remember
I got
that.
4 more, but I'm just gonna wait till the next meeting, so I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know, right?
So, Leanne, two questions. One is more of a process, and one is salary scale.
Okay.
So, process-wise, does this serve as first reading? Next opportunity
Yes.
would be second reading, and then a vote and all that kind of stuff, because I don't think
Correct.
we're voting on anything tonight.
Correct. So
that's-
this would serve as first reading.
Okay.
We will have the budget on the agenda for the first May meeting. And then if you choose and you would like it on the second meeting, we can, but we will have the public hearing scheduled for the June meeting as well as the approval of the budget that night. I believe it's June 7th is the date.
So not during
Um,
either of the May meetings, so we'll.
The first May meeting, yes, because after the second reading and after your discussion, then we have to go ahead and advertise for the public hearing.
Okay,
And I don't generally, you do not have to, your final budget does not have to be what we advertise, but we like it to be very similar. We don't want to have any significant changes for the public after we advertise and then for the public hearing.
And that would be June 4th. Is the
June 4th
Okay.
would be the public hearing and the approval.
Cool.
So this would serve as first reading.
as far as the line item here, the number one, on the number one priority list, that, or
Yes.
1 and 2.
Correct.
Can you talk about what, if we went with this budget exactly as presented today, what the impact in terms of increases are? I know you said we'd start at 50.
We would start at 50, and we are looking at potential opportunities with adjustments in our scale with the goal of overall increasing salaries for teachers for multiple years that they are with Fort Mill School District or for their whole career, hopefully, and what their earnings potential will be. And so as we fine tune that, we are going to put more information out about that to our teachers and give them more detail about that
I didn't know what
as
level
well.
of increase you included to create this budget number.
Yes. We included the dollar amount for the scale as we've developed it to date.
Okay. Okay.
The one that we think is the most beneficial for our teachers long-term across the board, across their career. Yes.
Okay. So it would involve an increase for everybody across the board.
It would absolutely
It's not-
be an
it's not
increase.
necessarily a flat increase.
Correct.
Okay.
It is not a flat increase, but it absolutely is an increase for every teacher in our
Every
district.
cell, every
Correct.
year, et cetera. Okay.
Yes.
Makes sense.
I don't have a question, but I have a statement.
Okay.
So, do you have a question before
No.
I? Okay. So, in light of what we've learned tonight, and again, 90% of our budget is salaries and benefits, 89.4, 90%. When you add utilities and maintenance, that's 95% of our budget.
Yes.
This is not a fringy, go out and spend a whole bunch of money because somebody feels like going shopping. This is heads and facilities. Our local money and our local taxation that makes up our budget has flip-flopped 20% in 4 years, roughly. And our local businesses are shelling the back of over 57% of our budget because our state is only providing 43% of our budget. So with that, I would like to issue a challenge to everyone that's sitting up here, but to everyone that's in public watching and or sitting in our audience tonight. our legislators, and in particular because it's sitting in our Senate right now where they're making the decisions on the budget, where they've already cut $30 million out of the budget that was sent over from the House, our senators are indicating that they're not hearing from anybody within our district or our area, or for that matter, in our state, that's saying that there's a problem with this budget and the funding mechanism and the model and the rest of it. So I would like to challenge everyone to reach out, and if you'd like to know how to reach our senators, our local senator is Michael Johnson. The other York County senator is Wes Clymer. But if you'd like to reach out to any of the other senators within the state, I can help you get in touch with them because I keep that cute little spreadsheet. But I think that if this does not wake us up, if this does not wake our legislators up, that there is a huge imbalance in what is going on with funding for public education in the state of South Carolina. So I would just challenge us to get some vocalness going on, because if they're saying that they're not hearing from us, then they need to hear from us. So. Exclamation
I'll piggyback on that comment. I'm going to end by just sharing with you what I just learned. I just got the Senate finance projections. And the state aid to classrooms, as Ms. Branning mentioned, the $30 million was pulled out. So the impact to us was $528,000 lower. The impact of pulling out the $30 million.
And we're already, with the budget
So-
you presented, $39 to the negative.
Right,
So now let's make it
28,000.
$500,000.
So
Would essentially
this,
eliminate priority 4.
it would either eliminate priority 4, or we could pull in the additional 500,000. We could add it to the 2 million
Right.
for next year. This is, the Senate finance, though, it's still based on the 45-day student counts. So all of these numbers will change again with the 135-day count. And I even heard that the State Department of Finance, they did not want to send the numbers. They initially said, well, we'll just wait until we've checked everyone's 135th day reports, and then we'll send them out. And the school business official said, please, we need some idea of what this means. Please go ahead and run these numbers. And so we just got these numbers to give us an idea. But like I say, this won't be the final because it is based on the 45-day. But I think any input we can give, as you mentioned, we absolutely need to do that, because this is how quick things can change.
Right.
Remember, I mentioned 2 districts lost money, overall lost money. I'm very fearful of opening up these spreadsheets and seeing the little, parentheses for the negative. I'm like, oh my goodness. So, but that's our most current data based on Senate finance. So,
Thank you very
okay,
much.
thank you.
All
That's
right,
not quite how I would
we've got one
categorize
other
it.
item, and it is an action item. At our last meeting, we did our first reading of the 24-25 strategic plan. Dr. Wakes is going to bring us any updates, and we have an action item to approve that, barring any questions or concerns.
Certainly. So I'm going to get to talk about all of the things that the budget you all are mulling over is going to come to fruition with the great teachers and assistants and administrators and everybody else that helps work towards our goals as a district. So as Christy mentioned, last meeting, I gave an overview of our strategic plan. I walked through some of the highlights of it, some of the different sections of it. We talked about how it's such a comprehensive process to get to where we are with the strategic plan. This is year 3 of 5, so it's just an update year. It's not a comprehensive overhaul like it will be in a couple more years when we go through Cognia accreditation again. So this year was more or less just looking at what we have done over the past year and making updates based off of the new data, and then presenting that plan to you all last week. So there have not been any changes on our end since the last meeting, so I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
I do not have any further questions.
I thought we had a great conversation.
I think so.
Last time.
I agree.
All right,
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration to approve the strategic plan as presented for the 23-24 updates.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to approve the strategic plan with updates made during the 23-24 year, which will be the 24-25 plan.
Correct, yes.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
much quicker than the,
Right?
discussion. We are in need of an executive session to discuss contractual and legal issues, so at this time,
Motion to go into
we'll
executive
move into
session.
executive session. Thank you all very much for joining us. We'll